Is Erin Persons. I'm with the National Community Stabilization Trust. I welcome all of you to NCST's Community Impact Briefing. I'm glad to see many of you back today. As a reminder, throughout our call, folks will be muted, and there will be time for Q&A. There will be time for you to raise your hand and chat, and we look forward to talking with all of you. To ask a question, there will be question and answer period right after our speaker concludes. To ask a question, you can either use the Q&A feature or you can use the chat, and we'll be sure to get your questions answered. With that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Raquel Reddy, who's going to introduce our guest speaker for today.
Great, thanks, Erin, and welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. But thanks for joining us. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Antoine Thompson, who's the National Executive Director of NAREB, today for our call. And Mr. Thompson will be talking about Black Homeownership Matters, an initiative that NAREB has been supporting and advocating for. So with that, Antoine, I'm going to give you the floor, and I think you'll bring up your presentation on your end.
Yes, first I want to, before I bring up my presentation, I want to say good afternoon to you and good morning to others. I'd also like to say a special hello to Julia, who works so hard. Some of you may or may not know, but she is always fighting a good fight, trying to help people, trying to provide good leaders, great leadership all over the country around housing and mortgage policy and helping those in need. So I want to say a special thank you to her and to you as well, and Mariah, for all the work that you all have done, and Erin to pull this together. And we look forward to doing some great things in 2020 and beyond. So I want to share my screen, so bear with me. I may need you to help navigate me through this, but I'm going to try. Okay, let me do that. All right. There you go. Okay, go back up to that. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
It says State of Housing in Black America?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, first, again, I want to thank everyone for having us today. We'll give you some good information that hopefully you can use. This presentation will be available. Raquel and the team will share the information. My name is Antoine Thompson, Executive Director for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. One of our primary things is trying to grow the rate of Black home ownership because it strengthens families and strengthens communities. We were founded in 1947. We're the oldest African-American real estate trade group. And with all the things going on in America, if I had an hour, I would go into why we were founded. But one of our primary things is our mission is to advance democracy in housing. Every year we put out a report called the State of Housing in Black America report. We will formally release our 2020 report on October 27th at 1 p.m. And so we look, hopefully you can come to our national conversation on Black home ownership. In response to our report in 2015, we launched a program called 2 Million New Black Homeowners under the mantra of Black Homeownership Matters. And that's important because the Sheba report examines a lot of the lending trends and patterns, and our 2 Million New Black Homeownership program is one of the solutions to help close the racial wealth gap in the country through increasing Black homeownership. In June of this year, the census put out their quarterly estimates. There's been a lot of debate about the estimated numbers that they put out, but they're the government. So their quarterly numbers as of June 30th was 47% for African Americans, 76% for whites, and that's just only for 1 quarter of this year, according to the data from them. Now, the other thing that's really important to note, since 2015, when we kickstarted this program, there have been over 750,000 new Black homeowners since 2015. So we're really excited about that. But the next slide will tell you why we have so much work to do. So Black ownership trends, as you can see on this chart, in 2000, we were rolling. African Americans were applying for mortgages. They were getting approved for a nice 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And then beginning in around 2001, 2002, you can see it starting to dip and then to pick back up and crest in 2003, really 2004. And it has not really reached that annual high since. And so part of the thing has been that there are a lot of legislative and institutional things that we need to address. But one of the things that as advocates that we also need to do is make sure that African Americans apply. So for the last 5 years, there's been a steady increase of African Americans applying for mortgages, still not at the rate of pre-2004. And that's important to note because you hear a lot about the 2008 crisis. But prior to 2004, African Americans were applying, at almost twice the rate that African Americans are applying for mortgages now. So we've got to get that enthusiasm back. We've got to still address some of the institutional barriers that exist in the mortgage industry, some of the legislative barriers and obstacles that exist. But we do need to also get more African Americans applying. That's why we have this program. One of the things that's really, really important, and we're going to talk a lot about this after our new report comes out in a couple weeks. For the last several years, this regional breakdown has been very disappointing. And most opinion makers and elected officials and leaders are unaware of this regional disparity. If you look at the number of mortgages that are originated for African Americans and how many apply, and then how many originations take place, look at those regional disparities. It is unbelievable, especially when you look at the fact that the southern region of the country has almost, the gap between how many people get approved and originated in the South compared to the Northeast is unbelievable. And it gets even worse in the West. So we have a lot of work to do. And that's something we're actually going to do a town hall on in November. The other thing is that a lot of African Americans have shifted to private mortgages companies the last several years. And there are a number of factors that we believe contribute to that. Many people have moved towards non-banks. Some of that is about outreach. Some of that is about pricing as well. And then some of it is because, many of those private mortgage companies are providing FHA products, and a lot of the traditional banks or depository institutions are not doing those. But the private lenders have been very, very, very aggressive. The other thing is, why does Black ownership matters? Some people talk about home ownership from kind of a moral compass. We try to talk about it from the economics of it and the socioeconomic perspective as well. But a lot about the fact that it not only strengthens families and stabilizes them, but it also stabilizes neighborhoods. It creates jobs. Every time one house is sold, whether it's sold or built, a lot of jobs, anywhere from 8 to 15 or so jobs are impacted by one real estate transaction. So it represents about 20% of the GDP for the United States of America. And that's true when African Americans are buying, so we got to increase that. The other thing is over 40% of small businesses start in the home, and a lot of African Americans have started business. Unfortunately, due to COVID, so many have lost, but the home becomes an even more important place right now. The other thing is educational attainment is higher and stronger when people own homes, and health and economic outcomes are higher when we increase home ownership. This particular slide is just a quick slide that shows you just some of the trends in a couple of the markets and some of the lending disparities that exist in the country. And so this one looks at the DC area. We call it the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, for those of you who are around the country. And you look at some of the home ownership rates. So if you look at the metro area, some really interesting numbers. But I want you to take an even closer look at some of the lending patterns that exist as well. And the key, though, is looking at this number right here. All right, so this number, as you see, the denial rate is double, and that's what we have to work on trying to close. We got to get more people to apply, right? Look at that number right there. See that number? That's a frightening number. And there's a lot of folks of color in this area. So we have low applications, and then we have a double denial rate, right? And there's another column I normally would show as well. Next, I want to show you Newark, New Jersey. We're looking at doing a home ownership campaign in that area that's starting in a couple weeks. But if you look at Newark, for example, just some of the numbers there, look at the Black population, and even where there's a high Black population, the home ownership rate is really, it's really bad to me. But then when we look at applications, African Americans, even though they make up 40 some odd percent in that city, they're not applying enough. And then when we look at the denial rate, it's not twice as bad, it's not twice as they're not getting denied at twice the rate of whites, but it's still significantly higher. Just a few things I want to share with you. One of the things is I know we have a lot of investors and developers on this call and institutions. When we talk about home ownership, we want to talk about sustainable, affordable, but also accessible home ownership. We also want to refer to it as protecting the American dream of home ownership. In 2017, there was an effort to take away the mortgage interest deduction. It was weakened. Hopefully we can address that issue in January. But we also know that we've got to create incentives to increase home ownership as well, because it is the #1 way that we build wealth, create wealth, and that's how we'll close the racial gap in home ownership. So our program for creating 2 million new Black homeowners, we do a lot of advocacy work at the local, state, and federal level. We do a lot of advertising. In fact, we're about to launch a advertising and marketing campaign in DC, Metro DC, Newark, and Atlanta to get more African Americans to apply for mortgages. And we've been involved on a lot of legislative policy, working with a number of organizations as well. The next thing I just wanted to share with you is just some of the other things we're doing. We do a lot of community outreach activities. We believe in training our members around advocacy and leadership development. And we're really trying to get some more federal policy that strongly promotes home ownership. And there's a number of things that we're doing on that. In 2019, we launched a program called House Then the Car. And I'll give you just a quick snapshot on that. That program is really focused on growing millennial home ownership in the country. These are some of the markers that we're looking at to really get those millennials who represent over 25% of the buyers these days, if not more, probably close to 40%. And also we have a program called Rosie, which is real estate opportunities for seasoned individuals. Those 50-year-olds and older like me want to make sure that they keep their property, they have good life insurance, and that they can then transfer that wealth to their next generation. We do a lot with fraternal organizations, sororities, a lot of churches. We have a national civic engagement strategy where we're working with churches, different denominations, national denominations around the country to advance home ownership. The last couple of things I want to mention in my last 3 minutes. One is that the market opportunity. This is really important. As I said earlier, yes, there's a social responsibility, but let's talk about the economics. According to the Urban Institute, there are over 1 million African Americans, Black millennials, that make over $100,000 a year. They have low debt to income ratios. Some of them probably have moved back home, since 52% of millennials have moved back home with their parents. There are also 3 million African Americans that are mortgage ready, according to Freddie Mac. And there are about 2.1 million within credit files. But if we just look at the 3 million African Americans that are mortgage ready in the country, and we could get even 1 million more of those moved into home ownership, we can really make a difference. We got to do it. So part of that is education and marketing campaigns. It's also about policy changes, and it's a way that we need to really push hard. So if you look at this, those 3 areas I was sharing with you, just look at how many mortgage-ready people there are in those 3 markets alone. That's what we have to communicate to lenders and developers. How do we get those folks into home ownership? So we're always looking for more partnerships. We're focusing, as I stated earlier, on millennials and working with civic and fraternal organizations. We know that down payment is a barrier to home ownership. We know that there's some bias in the industry. We also believe that there needs to be greater diversity from the C-suite down to the loan officers and underwriters in these companies as well. The last couple of things I just want to share with you is about some of the things that we believe that are important to address it at the national level. And I had another slide, but I just realized I don't have my state slide on here. But a couple of things is, one is promoting home ownership as a priority for public policy makers. We must protect the 30-year mortgage. If we did not have a 30-year mortgage, many people would not be homeowners, because most people don't have 20% to put down, and they would not have been homeowners. That was created during the Great Depression, and we've kept that model to make it possible so that more people could become homeowners. The other thing is dealing with the loan level equality. It's not just about getting a mortgage, it's making sure that the pricing and the terms are equitable, that they're fair, and they don't have any biases. This credit model situation that we really advanced in the 1980s is riddled with errors, and technology has not made it any better. We have been working with your organization around the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, and we're also really proud of the American Dream Down Payment Act, which is a program that's similar to a college savings plan, but you use it for a home. You save money with a tax advantage to save for a home. So that bill was just recently introduced, and hopefully sometime next year it will become law. The last thing is that we believe that there needs to be an African American home ownership program, something similar to the Native American, Alaskan, and Hawaiian home ownership program, to deal with our historic discrimination that has existed in the lending and real estate industries for many, many, many years. And we think that that would help. It won't be a panacea, but it will be a strong step forward to help bridge the gap and close the gap in home ownership. So I'll take any questions, Raquel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antoine, for your presentation this morning. These numbers are just staggering. And I know NCST remains committed to working in partnership with you and others to make positive change there. At this point, yes, we will go ahead and take some questions. I know, Antoine, your time is short today. Reminding folks that we can either use the Q&A feature, or you can certainly raise your hand and I'm happy to unmute your line. Frank Martin, I'm unmuting you. You will need to unmute yourself as well.
Thanks for taking my question. One of the things you'd mentioned, which was pretty interesting, was about millennial stats and their earnings. Given those numbers, why do you think that you're not seeing an uptick of home ownership, given that they have the financial wherewithal and the low debt to income or debt to income ratios?
So there are a couple things. Many of them are starting to make that turn. It's just not at the rate that I think most of us would like, given what you just, as you just stated. So there are a couple things with that. One is about education and awareness. You know, we've got to do a better job of sharing with people that they don't need 20% down. We have to do a better job of talking about the fact that this is many millennials like the word investment versus just being a homeowner, because I got a family, and the family structure today is not the typical family structure of the past. And then also I think that with COVID now, people are, a lot of millennials, at least from some of the stuff we've been seeing, it's changed people's worldview, because when people were thinking about buying homes before, I'm not planning on being in the same area for 30 years. So part of the messaging must be the economic benefits, the stability, but also that it's an investment. And that investment doesn't mean that you got to live in the house for 30 years. But if you decide you live in DC, decide to go to California or Houston and take another opportunity, you can rent that out to someone else, right? And you have some investment income. So we got to educate people about that. And we also got to make it cool again. We've not had a real major national marketing campaign to promote home ownership at the federal level in probably 15 years or so.
Thanks for that. I think we can take one more question, Antoine, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
We've got a question around how race impacts appraisals. Do you feel that low appraisals in predominantly African-American neighborhoods primarily reflect low demand, or are there other ways in which bias is affecting those appraisals?
Yeah, so one of my best friends is an architect, and I have a number of friends in our association that are appraisers. So these two industries have a, you know, finding a black, I'm originally from Buffalo, I live in the DC area. I lived in Buffalo for 40 some odd years. I've only met one black appraiser in the whole city of Buffalo my entire life. And I travel, I'm very engaged. So part of it is we need to diversify the industry, right? Really important. But also we need to make sure that the standards that are used when we do appraisals, that there's some consistency. You know, being in real estate for next year 10 years, because I still hold a real estate license, so I've seen these situations. And so you have the human side and you have industry patterns as well. And so there is some bias. You know, no one's free of certain biases. It's not a secret. There's been a lot of stories where African Americans who have had their properties undervalued by blacks and by whites, just more disproportionately by whites, but even by blacks. So we have to do a lot of educating. We have to diversify the industry. We got to make sure that the local and state government are doing more to shore up these neighborhoods in terms of investments. And so there is bias in the industry, and we've got a lot of work to do on it. And getting an appraiser's license it's not gotten easier over the last 10 years.
Antoine, I know that your time is short today. We truly appreciate the time you were able to spend with us. For those of you that still had questions that were out there, we will follow up with Antoine, and he has agreed to provide us some additional insight. The recording and this deck will also be available after the call. We will send that out to everyone in a link. But I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, Antoine, and thank you again for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you, and anytime you want me to come back, I'm here. I love what you all do, and let me know how we can be supportive. God bless. Take care.
Thank you so much. All right. I know that there were some questions outstanding. As I said, we'll go ahead and follow up with Antoine. His time was a bit short with us this morning, but we'll get you answers to those questions. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Julia Gordon for our policy update.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Antoine and I see each other at a lot of meetings. It was great to have him here today. So I wish I had, great policy news on the COVID stimulus bill side. I don't have great news, but at least I have some news, which is better than nothing, which is that it feels like a tiny little window has opened again, potentially for the House and Senate to come together and do something to help all the people who continue to struggle out there. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that effort. So most of you remember that the HEROES Act was introduced by the House and passed by the House quite a number of months ago now, and was never taken up by the Senate. So what's happening now is the House this weekend released a new version, what they call a skinnier version, which really just means a slightly less expensive version of much of what was in the HEROES Act. It does a lot of the things the original version did. Perhaps most importantly, it will provide those additional payments to people that they need, including the weekly $600 federal unemployment payments, a second round of direct payments to families at the same, $1,200 level that the first round came out at, and then a number of other funds. Something that's very important to lots of you is the bill includes $436 billion for assistance to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments, because we know that municipalities are just really, really strapped right now. And then it will also provide additional PPP loans to small businesses. So, everybody needs to, keep their fingers crossed on this, because it's really important that something like this passes to help people. But I do want to talk specifically about the housing provisions. Something a lot of you have contacted us about is what's happening with emergency rental assistance, especially in light of the CDC prohibition on evictions. And this has fallen very hard on, small landlords, nonprofit landlords, trying to figure out, how can I not evict somebody if they're not paying? Because then how do I meet the payments I need to make? And so the HEROES Act would provide a number of additional sources of funding for rental assistance, including a $50 billion fund that could be accessed, regardless of whether, outside of the assisted rental programs. It also would establish a $21 billion homeownership assistance fund that would run through the state HFAs to be able to help people with their mortgages, whether it's helping them make payments on their mortgages or perhaps pay arrearages to get back into a mortgage after a forbearance, or to help with escrows or insurance or utility payments that are preventing homeowners from being able to continue to keep their home and not lose it to foreclosure. So, those are really important sources of funding. And finally, the HEROES Act version 2 does include a number of protections that relate to mortgage servicing that would help people who are unable to pay their mortgage right now due to COVID. And that includes extending the forbearance provisions to the whole market, not just the federally backed market, and allowing servicers to provide forbearance to people who went delinquent on their loans post-COVID, but either didn't reach out to their servicer or weren't able to contact their servicer. So we consider that a very important provision. There are also provisions to make sure that when people come back into paying their mortgage after a forbearance, that they are able to do so without any kind of requirement that they pay some lump sum of the arrearages that have accumulated. So that is what's happening legislatively. Not a whole lot of other action from the regulatory side. FHFA has extended its various flexibilities that relate to COVID. As you all know, the moratorium now continues through the end of December. One outstanding question is whether there's a deadline on when borrowers need to get into their initial forbearance period. Fannie and Freddie don't have a deadline. USDA has extended that deadline to the end of the year. Right now, FHA still has a deadline of the end of October. It is rumored that that's going to be changed. I keep my fingers crossed that that will be able to be changed. But to the extent you're in touch with FHA borrowers, that's just something to keep in mind. Other things happening on the regulatory front is the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve has announced their effort to update the Community Reinvestment Act. And fortunately, their version is much more productive and helpful to those of us who work in underserved communities than the version that the OCC finalized earlier this year. So that's something that we'll be commenting on. Keep an eye on our newsletter for other information about that, or for opportunities to sign on to whatever we say, or always best when folks weigh in themselves with regulatory agencies. So I am going to stop there. There may be questions. Obviously, mostly all that's happening in the policy area right now is that we're just a little over 30 days out from an election, and that's dominating headlines, especially after the debate. Obviously, the Supreme Court vacancy is dominating Congress right now. So that's, unfortunately, these things are really getting in the way right now of Congress doing what they need to do to help people continuing to struggle by the pandemic and the continued recession. So I'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Fantastic. As a reminder, folks, you can either use the Q&A, you can use the chat, or you're welcome to raise your hand and ask Julia questions directly. Julia, I'm not seeing any questions right away. We do have some time left in our call. You can continue to ask questions of Julia, but we do have some time left where we wanted to touch on a couple of topics based on our conversation with Antoine this morning. So, you know, looking at promotion of Black home ownership in communities, how is that happening in your community? And what do you feel are the biggest challenges around increasing Black home ownership rates where you live and work? If we've got feedback on that, we would love to take it. This remains an issue that NCST is passionate about and as I said before, passionate about making a change related to. Feedback from folks. Got a quiet group today. Folks might still be reeling from last night's excitement. Julia, I'm not seeing any questions or feedback right now. I know that we've got some reminders related to middle neighborhoods. Raquel, do you want to share that? And then Sally, I do see, that's great feedback. So in Cleveland, there's a lack of proactive marketing and skilled community development lending professionals. The mortgage products are not promoted well. So important and noted there for Cleveland. Raquel, middle neighborhoods?
Yeah, I'd love to just remind folks about 2 middle neighborhood webinars. They're actually both scheduled for tomorrow, October the 1st. One is Middle Neighborhoods 101, and that's taking place from 11 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then shortly after that is going to be the part 2 series of Black middle neighborhoods, and that's scheduled from 12 to 1:30 tomorrow as well. So if you're interested in any of those, you know, please sign up, and we'd love to have you participate and attend those as well.
Wonderful, thank you, Raquel. Julia, I'm going to turn this last question from Jerry Flick over to you. What's the status of Federal Reserve Main Street program for nonprofits? Is there a change in the financial requirements and the number of employees? And after you are able to answer that question, I'll have you close us out today.
So I'm not sure, like a change from, you know, you're asking a change from when. I think folks know that originally this program was not going to include nonprofits and was not going to include companies with fewer than 50 people on payroll, and that they heard a lot of comments, including from us, and ultimately that was changed so that nonprofits and companies, I believe, with 10 or more on payroll are able to access that. What we've been seeing, though, is that it's been very hard for people to access this financing. There are a lot of requirements for the banks and lenders participating that I guess they've not been interested in having to meet. So I think so far it's probably not going too far to say this, you know, this program is not being seen as one of the great successes, certainly not as successful as PPP in terms of getting funding out there to help through the crisis.
Not seeing any additional items this morning, Julia. Any last thoughts as we close out?
My only last thoughts are that, none of our businesses are really going to come back until we get COVID under control. It's obviously tough here at NCST, where we wish we had more inventory for you. And I know it's tough out there in everybody's neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods that are very hard hit health-wise. Communities of color have been disproportionately hit health-wise, and also disproportionately hit in terms of job loss, and job loss that looks like it might be a little more long lasting than some of the more temporary job loss that was more associated with the full lockdown situation. So, you know, folks know what they need to do here, and you know, certainly encourage everybody to be involved in community efforts to encourage masking and social distancing and all the things that we need so that we can get back to normal. And that's just, you know, we continue to maintain a COVID resources page on the NCST website. I encourage you to go there because we've got a lot of great stuff there. And again, as I'm sure Raquel and Mariah will always tell you, please be in touch with us. Just let us know what's happening in your community. Let us know what's happening with your business. We want to know what's happening with inventory outside of the NCST context. You know, we know that supply is as tight as it's ever been, that home prices are high. They're really getting out of reach for first-time homeowners and for low and moderate income homeowners. And just the more information we can get from you, the more we can fold that into our policy efforts that we're making here. And someone said, how do we stay in touch with you? Well, we do have these regular calls, but if you go to our website, there's various sort of informational email addresses listed there. And you know, my personal email is jgordon@stabilizationtrust.org, and folks are welcome to contact me as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Julia. And thank you to everyone for attending. We'll see you again in a couple weeks, and do keep in touch. Bye now.
Thanks.